Welcome to The Real News. I'm Eddie Conway, coming to you from Baltimore. Recently, there's been activity organizing in the Black community around Black workers. So joining me today, the Executive Director of the National Black Workers Center, Tanya Wallace-Gobern. Tanya, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Eddie, for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Tanya, can you explain to me what this National Black Workers Center is and how long it's been in existence?
Sure, that's a very good question, Eddie. So the National Black Workers Center project began its operation in 2012, but what's more important to know is that the first Black Worker Center was founded in 1981 in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. It was created in response to companies moving from the north to the south to exploit the workforce, right, which was predominantly African American. And so because there wasn't the traditional trade unionism that existed there and labor organizing that existed in the South, the workers decided to mobilize and organize themselves so that they could have the dignity, respect, and a better quality of work on the job. Currently, we have 8 worker centers across the country. We're based, as I mentioned, in Raleigh, in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. We are in New Orleans, Washington, D.C., Chicago, L.A., Oakland, California, and most recently, we launched a worker center last January in Baltimore.
Okay, so can you tell me, I mean, and I understand in Rocky Mount there was the pushback against exploiting the Black workers and so on because of cheap labor and the right to work, state laws and that kind of stuff. But what are the centers doing in these other areas?
That's right. So when you think about worker centers, I think traditionally people think about worker centers for immigrant communities, for Latinos, for Asians, things like that. And similarly, worker centers exist to provide education, provide resources to handle issues when people are being exploited and disrespected or even discriminated against on the job. And we know as African Americans, as Black folks, that's not something that only occurs in the South, for example, right? It takes place wherever Black people are. And so our worker centers exist to really push back on the discrimination that Black people experience in the workplace. And they do that in a variety of different ways, really addressing the needs that take place in their community. So for example, our worker center in Los Angeles, the LA Black Worker Center, they are working heavily in the construction industry, really working to ensure that African Americans have access to construction jobs. We know that construction has been a mainstay in the Black community. It's been a way and an avenue for us to move into the middle class society. Our folks in New Orleans are working on having access to transportation to get to work. And one of the ways that they're doing that is through a traffic clinic, really helping people to eliminate any fines that they have, any outstanding tickets that they have that prevent them from having access to driving and getting to and from work. And so the work of our worker centers looks different based on the needs of each individual community.
Okay, well, they certainly need the Baltimore Workers Center, the one here in Maryland, certainly need to be engaged in the construction industry here because there's a tremendous amount of deconstruction of houses and very little Black workforce involved and engaged in that process. Most of the contractors are from out in the county and most of the workers are immigrant workers or whatever they can get for cheap labor. So we certainly need that kind of a drive here, if I could like drop a hint, right? You know, one of the things that I noticed is that you're organizing a Black Workers Expo.
That's right. So One of the events that we have planned is scheduled to take place in August next year, 2019, and we're calling it a Working While Black Expo. And so in the tradition of Black Expos in our country, right, it's a bringing together of people to exchange ideas, to talk about innovative ways to organize, to mobilize, to build base, to talk about and educate folks on what to do when you're encountering and facing discrimination and harassment in the workplace. And since you mentioned construction, one of the things that we hope to achieve is to have a building trades apprenticeship, an apprenticeship fair where people can find out different ways that they can get involved and become involved in apprenticeships with unions so that they can have access to those good jobs. Where is this expo taking place at? So that's one of the reasons that we are in town now. We're scouting out different locations. One of the main criteria for us is that we make sure that our location, wherever we select, is in the community where it's we hope to serve, those residents. So something that's accessible to public transportation, and our goal is to bring together 600 residents, African American residents in Baltimore.
Okay, so if I understand what you're saying, then in different cities there will be many expos. There's not going to be like the one I noticed that you mentioned in some of your literature back in 1895. No, maybe 1885 or something.
That's right.
In Georgia, the expo there that brought together people from all over the South and about black workers, their innovations and so on. So you're talking about having little mini expos and not one major thing like they did in Chicago or?
Right. Well, we're talking about launching one major expo and starting that major expo in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And ideally what will happen is that in every city where we have a Black Worker Center, moving forward from 2019, there will be a Black Worker Expo.
Okay, so it will be moving around once it gets started.
That's exactly right, but we're launching here in Baltimore.
Okay. Okay, so I guess what my concern is, where does this center go into the future, and how does it, especially in the age of Trump, mm-hmm. how does it become relevant mm-hmm. for black workers since we're largely unemployed and ununionized?
Well, that's a good question, and especially since you raised the question of the age of Trump. And I would suggest to you that even prior to Trump's administration, the issues that we've had as African American workers have always existed. We recognize at the National Black Worker Center that while our focus is on the Black community, the reality is when there's any type of racism, when there's any type of discrimination, when there's any type of effort to undermine workers and people in this country, it begins in the African American community. And so it is our responsibility to really address these issues, to come up with solutions, because not only do they help black workers, they help all workers, because we know, right, exploitation doesn't just get contained within one community. We believe that it begins in the black community, and like a cancer, it spreads through the rest of us. And I think that that's what we're seeing with the Trump administration. And so to answer your question in terms of where do we go, one, it begins with education. Two, it begins with base building so that people can understand their power, the power of organizing, the power of mobilizing, so that we can change the trajectory of what's going on, right? Organizing our communities so that they can speak up and demand better jobs, better opportunities, et cetera, within their communities. And that's something that we are doing nationally to support, provide support to our worker centers who are doing those types of efforts within their communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, two things came to mind, and one is, are you working toward building allies in the Latino community, the white community, or among the traditional labor unions mm-hmm. and so on?
Mm-hmm. You know, that's a question that comes up frequently, and it's no, small feat or coincidence that our name is the National Black Worker Center Project. One of the reasons that we have identified as such is that historically, Black people get left behind, right? We've been told that it's not a race issue, right? It's a class issue. It's a feminist issue. And we say it's a Black issue. And so what I shared with you earlier, right? It begins with us and it ends with us. And so our priority is the Black worker. And we strongly believe that it's once we come to solutions within the Black community, that other communities will be able to benefit from those solutions. But it begins with us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the other question that had came to mind was that, you know, moral suasion is one thing, legal challenges is something else, but things don't seem to change unless there's boots on the ground. Do you have a ground game? I mean, if Black workers are gonna go out and make demands by pounding the pavement or knocking on doors or boycotting or any of that kind of stuff to make a difference?
Yeah, and so what I hear you talking about is organizing and that base building that we've been talking about. And so the reality is a lot of people talk about organizing, but organizing isn't just showing up at a rally, right? And it's not just waving a poster or a banner or having a slogan. It's really being strategic and thoughtful about having that long game approach that you talked about. And it's a skill. It's a skill that we can look back to when we look at the civil rights movement, and it's a skill that isn't necessarily taught in our communities anymore. It's a skill that I would say also that's been used against us when we look at the Trump administration and how they've been able to mobilize their base. And so the first part for us is to bring that skill back into our communities, to let people know that it's not, you don't win solely by showing up to a rally. You don't win solely by liking something on Facebook or signing a petition. Those are the first steps. But the campaign one is a longer strategy. And we have to understand what step one is, step two, step three, step four, and to set up a realistic expectations for people, right? This will not be something that we are able to solve within the next year. And so the way that we are doing our organizing is looking at is launching different campaigns and looking at strategies that allow us to win small gains, that allow us to build momentum. And as people see the work that we are doing, to say, I want to be part of that, and to help grow our movement, if you will. One of the things that's different about the National Black Worker Center is that we are not an organization that exists solely to have more members. What we say is that we don't need more members, we need more leaders. And so our job is to grow, develop, and to help people realize the leader that exists within them and give them the space to stand up and to lead.
Mm-hmm. It sounds sort of like Ella Baker's program.
Yes, yes.
You know, strong people don't need strong leaders.
Well, that is true.
Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, definitely. I would say if people want to, if anything that I've said resonates with folks and they want to get involved and learn more about what we do, definitely they can find us on social media. And I would ask them to visit our website, www.nationalblackworkercenters.org, to find out about where we're at, the work that we're doing, the campaigns that we are launching throughout the country, and definitely keep visiting our website so that you can find out when and where we will hold the Working While Black Expo in Baltimore in 2019.
Okay, thank you. And before that happens, I think I will try to have you come back here and talk a little more about that as we get closer to that particular event.
That'd be great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining The Real News.